There's a kind of connection that feels intense from the very beginning. It pulls you in fast. It feels deep, consuming, almost undeniable. You think about them constantly. The highs feel incredible. The lows feel unbearable. And somehow, even when it hurts, you can't seem to let go. It doesn't feel casual. It feels important. It feels like love. But it's not. It's something else entirely. It's a trauma bond. And the reason it's so dangerous is because it mimics love so convincingly that most people don't question it until they're already deeply attached. By the time you start noticing the patterns, you're already invested. Emotionally, mentally, sometimes even physically tied to the dynamic in a way that feels impossible to break. So, if you've ever found yourself stuck in a connection that hurts but feels hard to leave, this is where you need to look. Not at what you hope it is, but at what it actually is. Intensity is not the same as connection. One of the biggest reasons trauma bonds feel like love is because of intensity. Everything is amplified. The attention feels overwhelming at times. The closeness feels immediate. The emotional swings are strong enough to make you feel like something real must be there. But intensity is not a reliable indicator of connection. In fact, it often signals instability. Because, real connection doesn't require constant emotional highs and lows to exist. It's steady, it's consistent, it builds over time. Trauma bonds, on the other hand, are built on fluctuation. You're pulled in, then pushed away. You're valued, then dismissed. You feel close, then distant, and that cycle creates emotional dependence because, your mind starts associating relief with connection. When things are good, it feels like everything is finally working. When things are bad, you feel the loss immediately, and that contrast keeps you attached. Not because the connection is healthy, but because the emotional cycle is addictive. Your brain becomes attached to the pattern, not the person. This is where it gets deeper, because what you're attached to isn't just the person, it's the pattern, the unpredictability, the moments of validation, the relief after tension. Your brain starts to link those moments together. The pain creates tension. The relief releases it. And over time, that cycle reinforces itself. You start craving the moments when things feel good, not realizing that those moments only exist because of the instability surrounding them. It's not consistent care, it's intermittent reinforcement. And, that's one of the strongest forms of conditioning. To start breaking this, you have to separate the person from the pattern. Ask yourself, if the highs didn't exist, would I stay for the lows? Because often it's the temporary relief that keeps the cycle going, not the overall quality of the connection. You confuse emotional withdrawal with loss of love. When you're in a trauma bond, emotional distance feels like something is being taken away from you. You feel it immediately. The shift in tone, the lack of attention, the change in behavior, and your instinct is to fix it, to get back to how things were. Because those earlier moments felt so real. But what you're reacting to isn't the loss of stable love. It's the loss of attention. And when attention has been inconsistent, it becomes more valuable. Not because it's inherently meaningful, but because it's unpredictable. This is why you may find yourself overanalyzing, overextending, or trying harder when things feel off. You're trying to restore something that was never stable to begin with, and that keeps you locked in the cycle. Your past conditioning makes certain dynamics feel familiar. Trauma bonds don't happen randomly. They align with something you've already experienced. Not necessarily in the exact same way, but in the emotional pattern. If you grew up around inconsistency, emotional distance, or unpredictability, your system may recognize those dynamics, not consciously, but internally. And, familiarity creates comfort, even when it's not healthy. So, when you enter a connection that mirrors those patterns, it can feel natural, even if it's painful, because part of you already understands how to navigate it. That doesn't mean you want it, but it means you recognize it, and recognition can feel like connection if you're not aware of it. To shift this, you have to start questioning familiarity. Not everything that feels natural is aligned. Sometimes it's just familiar. You start prioritizing the relationship over your own well-being. As the bond strengthens, your focus shifts. You start organizing your thoughts, your time, your energy around maintaining the connection. You think about what to say, how to respond, how to avoid conflict, how to keep things stable. And slowly, your own needs start to move into the background. Not because you don't have them, but because the relationship takes priority. This is where self-abandonment begins. You ignore what you feel. You downplay what bothers you. You justify behavior that doesn't sit right with you, all to keep the connection intact. But, a relationship that requires you to disconnect from yourself is not sustainable. It may feel intense, sure, but it's not healthy. To begin shifting this, you have to bring your focus back to yourself, not in a reactive way, but in an honest one. Ask yourself, how do I feel in this connection, consistently? Not just in the good moments, but overall. Because your overall experience matters more than temporary highs. You mistake emotional dependency for deep connection. This is one of the most common confusions, because the more you think about someone, the more you feel affected by them, the more your mood depends on them, the more it can feel like a strong connection. But dependency is not the same as depth. Dependency means your emotional state is tied to their behavior. Depth means you understand each other. One creates instability, the other creates connection. In a trauma bond, dependency often replaces depth. You feel connected because you're emotionally invested, but that investment is driven by the cycle, not by mutual understanding. And that's why it can feel so consuming. Because it's not grounded, it's reactive. Breaking the bond feels like withdrawal, not clarity. This is where most people struggle. Because even when you recognize that the connection isn't healthy, leaving it doesn't feel like relief immediately. It feels like loss, like withdrawal. Your mind keeps going back to the good moments, the potential, what it could have been. And that makes it hard to stay consistent in your decision, because part of you is still attached, not just to the person, but to the pattern. To move through this, you have to understand that the discomfort is part of the process, not a sign that you made the wrong decision, but a sign that you're breaking a cycle. And breaking cycles doesn't feel comfortable. It feels unfamiliar. But, unfamiliar is where change happens. Real love feels different, and that difference can feel strange at first. When you step out of a trauma bond and experience something more stable, it may not feel as intense. It may feel calm, consistent, predictable, and part of you might question it, because you're used to the highs and lows. But that calmness is not a lack of connection. It's a sign of stability. Real love doesn't rely on emotional swings to feel meaningful. It builds through consistency, through mutual effort, through understanding. And that kind of connection doesn't create the same kind of urgency. It creates something else, security. And if you're not used to that, it can feel unfamiliar. But unfamiliar doesn't mean wrong. It means different. You have to choose clarity over intensity. At the end of all of this, the shift comes down to what you prioritize. If you prioritize intensity, you may keep finding yourself in similar patterns, because intensity is easy to create. But if you prioritize clarity, stability, and mutual connection, your choices start to change. Not instantly, but gradually. You start recognizing patterns earlier. You start valuing consistency more. You become less willing to tolerate instability. And that changes what you allow into your life, because you're no longer confusing emotional intensity with love. You're seeing it for what it is, a pattern. And once you see it clearly, you have the option to step out of it. If this kind of depth is what you're here for, real understanding, real awareness, no surface-level noise, then you already know this isn't easy, but it's necessary. So if you're ready to stop confusing trauma bonds with love and start building something that's actually stable, make sure you subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because honestly, most people don't realize what they're in until it's already controlling them. And by then, it's much harder to walk away.